Hi everybody, Kim here. Today we are going to continue to talk about the LDS Church, the Church of Latter-day Saints. But today we're going to talk about the groups that splintered off from the LDS Church and became polygamist branches of the LDS Church. Now, the one thing to remember, in the 1840s, Joseph Smith, who was the founder of the Church of Latter-day Saints, or Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, had a revelation that he needed to have multiple wives. Now, his wife Emma wasn't happy with it, and she really had to be pressured to allow Joseph to take other wives. Now, some will say, oh, he never practiced polygamy, even though it's proven in the church documents. The church is documented that he did have multiple wives. Other ones will say, oh, it was only spiritual wives for after he's dead in the celestial kingdom. But he did have multiple wives. And not only did he practice it, but a lot of the other people within the LDS Church practiced it. He practiced it. Brigham Young practiced it. I believe Lorenzo Snow practiced it. John Taylor did. John W. Taylor, his son, did. There were a lot of members higher up in the church that did practice polygamy. Excuse me. Now, the church made a couple attempts to end the polygamy. So Joseph Smith had his vision in the 1840s. In 1890, Wilford Woodruff, who was president of the church, came out and said, yeah, no more polygamous marriages, wink, wink, nod, nod. The church itself would not perform the marriages of men who were becoming married to more than one, to another wife, not their first wife, but another wife. So they did allow it. They just did wink, wink, nod, nod. And that was in 1890. Now, in the 1890s, the federal government really started breaking down on polygamy. And they would go in to houses. They would arrest the husbands. They would arrest all the wives. Now, they would send one wife home to take care of all the children, but they would prosecute the other wives and the men for practicing polygamy. Then, in 1904, Joseph F. Smith, who was related to Joseph Smith, but this is Joseph F. Smith, which I think the F stands for Fielding, he proclaimed the second manifesto ending polygamous marriages. And he was, nobody, no minister, no bishop, anything is to perform a plural marriage. Now, before this, in 1886, John Taylor, who was a president of the LDS Church, not the president of the United States, but LDS President John Taylor, he practiced polygamy, and he had a revelation from the Lord that said, polygamy is something I commanded you all to do. I realize there's a lot of turmoil over it and stuff, so it's up to the individual man if he wants to practice polygamy or not. But I promise you, polygamy will never leave this earth. Polygamy will go on forever. So that was in 1886, and in 1904, Joseph F. Smith declared the Second Manifesto. Now, John Taylor's revelation is the undocumented, because even though there were people there when he had this revelation, he had it at, I can't think of the gentleman's name, who owned the farm. He had daughters who were in polygamous marriages, but because he relayed his revelation, but it was not written down and put into the church archives or canon, it's considered to be uncanonized. Then in 1904, when Utah sent their state representative to Washington, D.C. to be admitted into the Congress went, we're not so sure. You guys practice polygamy and all this weird stuff, and, that's just not, we're not sure that we're going to accept your representative. And so Joseph F. Smith had to go to Washington, D.C. and argue in front of Congress that, no, we don't practice polygamy. Well, about that time, excuse me, Gus is being very vocal. He would kind of like to have multiple wives, but he can't have children. He's been, is what I like to call a nutless wonder. He doesn't realize it yet. Well, he probably does realize it, but he doesn't. Anyways, back to what I was saying. John W. Taylor, who is John Taylor's son, who has multiple wives, he said, no, I have this revelation from my father, and this is what it says. And they're like, well, that's not in the church archives. He goes, no, I found it on his desk when he died. And I gave a copy of it to the church historian. And so there was a lot of back and forth about it. And so they said, yeah, it's not real. So the men who were married after the wink, wink, nod, nod to multiple wives, they left. They went to Canada, Idaho, Mexico, Montana, Wyoming. They left the Utah area. So, and that's kind of where all these offshoots or breakaway groups, they left, they went to different areas so they couldn't get in trouble. And we will talk about each of these splinter groups individually. Now, some of the differences between the mainstream LDS church and the splinter groups is, okay, the main branch of the LDS church does not practice polygamy. It's one wife, one husband. That's it. And they're sealed in the temple for all time and eternity. And they have eternal families. But all these breakaway groups, they take multiple wives. Some of the groups allow the man and the woman to choose to enter into the polygamous. They choose who they're going to get married to. Other ones, they're arranged. They're like, no, you're marrying Joe Blow down the street. Other ones say, no, you're marrying Joe Blow down the street, and you're going to marry your uncle, and we promised you to this cousin. But there are differences between the splinter groups that really differentiate them. how they dress, how they act, where they live. And why they really completely, I mean, a lot of them left the LDS church after the church said absolutely no more polygamous marriages. We're not going to have it. Is when they all left. They're all like, no. John Taylor told us. Other ones said no. John Taylor told us, but also we used to talk about having the keys to the priesthood. Now you guys are saying the office of the priesthood. And then as the church got bigger in Salt Lake City, the main LDS church, the presidents and the bishops and all that, they did not go out and do mission work. And that's not how the church originally was. That's not what they were told they were supposed to do. So as these people are sitting in their offices in Salt Lake City, these other groups are going, wait a minute, why aren't you out there trying to recruit? Why aren't you sharing the word of the Lord with other people? And we'll talk about which churches decided on what, how they practice, how they live, as I touch on each one individually. Now, I am going to tell you the one that's in Mexico, the LeBaron group. I'm going to touch very lightly on them because they're more of a dangerous group. And we'll get into that. We'll talk about it. But just to be safe, I'm going to touch on them very lightly, talk about differences, things. I'm not going to talk about some of the things the church does or has done. So, the breakaways happen. These new churches establish themselves at different times. It seems like there's differences. I mean, a lot of them started after the 1904 Manifesto. And that's when they really broke away. Even ones who their official start date, they kind of broke away after the first manifesto in 1890. But their start date is still kind of different from the other ones. One of the main differences for all of them, or something that is the same for all of them, is they recognize the first 3 presidents of the LDS Church. After that, they don't anymore. So, that's kind of one thing to look at, and it kind of goes right with, men really change the churches and what the church believes in. Not the society, but individual men higher up in the church. And so it'll be really interesting to get into each one of these. And I watched so many videos, read so many blogs, and kind of, pulled out the information that I noticed that I could verify that was the same on these groups. And yes, they all still exist. The AUB is, if you watch the Sister Wives, they're part of the AUB, or were. I've heard that they're no longer part of the church, but they were part of the AUB. So it'll be interesting to dive into each of these groups. I've done quite a bit of research, but that's basically, they're all supposed to get married, have lots of children, the main branch of the LDS church, it used to be you had to have 6 children. Now it's, we're going to kind of leave that to each couple individually. You still need to get little mini Mormons, or, excuse me, little mini saints out there, but they're not like some of these other groups with how all the children. The other groups, it's like as many as you can have. Some groups, it's like we expect a baby to be born every year. Not so much to an individual couple, but to the family itself. 1 children per year. So it'll be interesting to go through these. Or at least I hope you find it as interesting as I do. So we'll see you later. And I am trying to do at least 1 video a day. It might be a haul video, might be one on one of these splinter groups. It might be both, but I'm trying to do 1 a day for 30 days, just to get in the habit. So please like, share, subscribe, comment. I love comments. I read and respond to every comment. So I look forward to seeing you all again. Okay, bye.